But what really sets this camera apart is the design. This camera was designed with filmmakers in mind, and it does little things right that make a huge difference for filmmakers. For example, it has a flip out screen that comes out to the side. The touchscreen is impeccable, you can touch the autofocus, which is great, but a lot of the times that side flip up screen will often hit your mic jack and dislocate your mic jack. But they have made sure that that flip up screen is just the right distance away from your mic jack, so your flip up screen never hits your mic jack. And in the long run, if you're doing some intense shooting, that little thing can make a huge difference. On top of that, the body itself is nice and robust. You can get a really nice grip on it, which helps you balance and stabilize your camera that much more during documentary or running gun shoots. And another thing that I absolutely love about this camera is the LCD screen on top. I can look down, see my shutter speed, aperture, ISO, drive mode. This way I know for a fact that I'm never messing up any of my settings. And if I'm ever unsure during a shot, I can look down and double check. Also, the 90D comes with an 18-135 kit lens. Not only is that an impressive focal length, but that lens is also very sharp and very, very good. It will more than get the job done. And last but not least, this camera uses the LP6 battery, which is Canon's best battery. It will easily give you 4 to 5 hours of continuous shooting, if not an entire day if you're efficient with your battery. At the end of the day, this is one of Canon's best cameras. You get an APS-C sensor that is extremely high resolution. You get all the frame rates you want. You get an amazing focus mode. And honestly, there's nothing about this camera that I don't like. And considering everything this camera offers, the price point is very attractive. And now we're moving into our high-end cameras. These are cameras that are made for the hardcore enthusiasts and of course, professionals. Next up, we have the Canon 5D Mark IV, which for the longest time was Canon's best video camera. The Canon 5D Mark IV features a 30 megapixel full frame sensor. If you're doing any kind of professional work, I highly recommend switching over to a full frame sensor. Because of that larger sensor, you get less noise, more detail, and more dynamic range. All the benefits come from simply capturing light on a bigger piece of glass. This camera does 7 frames per second in continuous focus mode. Now that may not seem like a lot, but remember that you're capturing a full frame sensor, which is double the size of an APS-C size sensor, and it's also 30 megapixels. As for video, it does full HD from 24 all the way up to 60 frames per second, and it does 120 frames per second, sadly, in 720p. But the HD in this camera is more than meets the eye. What the camera actually does, it takes a full 4K image, super samples it down to 1080p, so you actually get an image that is as detailed and as sharp as a 4K image, but you get it in a 1080p container. This camera does do 4K at both 23 and 30 frames per second. However, it does that with a 1.7 times crop, and as I mentioned earlier, that crop is not ideal. Unfortunately, this camera uses motion JPEG or H.264 to record its videos, which really aren't ideal simply because they take up so much space on your card. CF cards are not cheap, neither are hard drives, and if you're going to be shooting with this camera constantly, you're going to use up a lot of hard drive space. But if you do end up using this camera, make no mistake, you are going to get absolutely gorgeous images. I would only recommend this camera to somebody that wants the robust design of a DSLR in their video camera. If not, the next camera after this is probably perfect for you. And let's talk about the next part of this camera, the autofocus. This camera has Canon's dual pixel autofocus, which is fabulous in both photos and video. Much like the 90D, the Canon 5D Mark IV is going to give you amazing results. When it comes to photos, the autofocus is fast and reliable. When it comes to video, the face tracking is superb and the camera keeps pace with modern cameras. Despite being a slightly older camera, the autofocus in this camera will not let you down. One thing I really appreciate is the touch autofocus. I tend to shoot a lot of people and it's really convenient to simply touch the person's face and know you have focus. The only thing I don't like about the camera is their implementation of C-Log. C-Log is Canon Cinema Profile, and initially when this camera came out, it did not have C-Log. They ended up adding C-Log into this camera almost a year after it came out. Unfortunately, because this camera wasn't designed with C-Log in mind, I find C-Log tends to be really